Great. I think we're going to get started. So welcome everyone to our Salem Transportation Policy meeting. I'm Eunice Kim, the Long Range Planning Manager for the City of Salem. I have a lot of folks here with me today, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Austin, Anthony, Julie, Steve, and Ted, feel free to unmute and say hello.
Thanks, Eunice. I'm Austin Ross, Long Range Planner with the City of Salem.
I'm Steve Dickey. I'm the Director of Technology and Program Management for Salem Area Mass Transit District. Chariots.
I'm Julie Warnicke. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Salem in the Public Works Department.
I'm Anthony Gumalo, a Senior Transportation Planner in the Public Works Department.
Hi everyone, I'm Ted Stonecliffe, planner with Chariots, and here to talk about transportation, one of my favorite subjects.
Great. So today our meeting is focused on transportation. Just as a reminder, we are using the chat, so if you have questions or comments, you can put them in there and we will address them. We are streaming live to YouTube, and we also will be capturing the chat and putting that online as well. So it will be public on the project website, just to let you all know. Austin? Great. So today we're going to give a brief overview of the Our Salem project and where we are in the process. And then the meeting is really divided into 3 different sections. The first section is going to be focused on draft policies that we really developed during the visioning phase when we were out and about over the last 1.5 years, 2 years, gathering ideas for the vision. The second portion is really going to be focused on new policy ideas. So these are ideas that staff has really researched from other communities in their comprehensive plans, and we'll be presenting those. And then your ideas. So there's a lot going on today, but hopefully we'll get through it all. So just as a reminder, the Our Salem project is a multi-year project to update our comprehensive plan. That's really the planning document that has high-level goals, policies, and a map that guide how we grow and develop over the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's a project that we've been working on since several years now. So this is a map hopefully you are all familiar with. The black dashed line here is the Salem city limits, and the gray area is our portion of the urban growth boundary. So when we talk about the Our Salem project and updating the comprehensive plan, we're talking about this gray area. It includes some areas of Marion and Polk County that are unincorporated. So we often talk about, we're seeing a lot of growth and development, and we're expecting more in the future, 60,000 more people by 2035. And when we talk about that, we're talking about this gray area. So where are we? So after the visioning process, that again was about 1.5 years or 2 years of outreach throughout the community, we took all of that information and feedback from the community and put together high-level goals across a range of topics from transportation, housing, economic development, the environment, and we put those in the vision document as well as a proposed comprehensive plan map. This is the high-level vision for how we see different uses, where we see different uses potentially going in the future. So we took that document, the vision document, to the City Council in March, so just last month, and we asked them for acceptance. This was really our check-in with the council to say, are we headed in the right direction, and should we proceed to the details of the project? They did accept that vision, and so we're now moving on to the details. There's a lot of details that we're working on, from the zoning code, the zoning map, and policies, but today we're really focused on policies. I'll touch a little bit later on about how you can get involved in the other portions if you're really interested in zoning code and zoning map as well. So this is our 4th of a series of weekly meetings we're having on different topics related to policies. We've touched on community engagement and equity, housing, and economic development. Today, the focus is transportation again, but every Wednesday, if you're interested in a different topic, feel free to come back. We're meeting at noon, which is now, and then at 5:30 in the evening. The meeting material is the same, so just come when you can to either one, and we'll really deep dive into specific topics. So as I mentioned earlier, the meeting today really is going to be focused on 3 different sections. And for each section, we're going to present to you new ideas or policy ideas. And then we're going to ask you to weigh in. We're kind of doing a new interactive voting to get input. And so you can do that either on a web browser on your computer or your phone or through texting. And we'll walk through that and how that all works. Anytime, feel free to put, again, questions in the chat and we will make sure to address them. So this is the opportunity to practice the polling because it is new. It is anonymous. It does ask for your name, but it's anonymous. And you can use whatever is easiest for you, whether it's a new browser on your computer or your phone, or you can text. And so the link is in the chat right now for the pollev.com/uniskim347. So when you go there, you should be able to enter your name and it will come up with automatic questions. So as we get to a question in the meeting, your screen will change. You don't have to refresh or anything like that. And if you want to text on your phone, if that's easier for you, instead of texting to a phone number or a name in your contact list, you text to 22333. And what you want to put in that text message is UnisKim347. Once you send that text, you'll get like a welcome, you're joining the session text back to you, and you'll know that you're in. So we're going to try it as a practice before we dive into the policies. So again, you can use your web browser using the link, or you can text. So if everyone can give it a shot, and we'll see if folks are ready to do live polling. And if it's not working, feel free to drop a message in the chat and we'll try to troubleshoot it. Oh, we just need to refresh. Let's just give it a couple more minutes and see if others are able to do it as well. Austin, what do you think our magic number is?
I think the magic number is about 23.
Okay. So you don't have to vote if you don't want to. Please explain again how to do it from your computer. Sure. If you want to go to pollev.com/uniskim347, we can drop the chat in the link again. There it is. You can just click on that. Is that working? Okay, it looks like everyone was able to do it. So now we'll move on. So as part of the vision document that we brought to council in March, we have a vision statement, which you see here on the screen. This vision statement really captured the shared priorities at a high level that we heard throughout our outreach in the community of what Salem wants to be in the future. And we just circled here that safe mobility was really something we've heard as a priority for years, but also through this project. And so that's here in our vision statement. Today, we're going to go through kind of what does that mean. We'll talk a little bit of the goals, and then we'll dive into the policies. So there's also a lot of other projects that are going on related to transportation. One is the Climate Action Plan, which is being led by the Public Works Department. A lot of the goals and strategies that are under consideration today have to do with transportation and reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. So we're coordinating closely with Patricia and the team to make sure that we understand what they're hearing and what their plans are so we can incorporate into our Salem and vice versa. And then the Transportation System Plan is a component of the comprehensive plan. It is the document that really has all of the detailed policies and projects lists related to transportation. And so today, while we're talking a lot about policy ideas for transportation, they will ultimately end up being incorporated into the Transportation System Plan when it is updated. So these are ideas that will feed into that process that we anticipate starting after the Our Salem project is done and the updated comprehensive plan is adopted. So it's a little bit a ways out, but because transportation is such an important topic in the community, we wanted to talk about it and continue talking about it and hear from the community now. There will be future opportunities to dive even more into details when that plan is updated and to talk about projects. But again, today, feel free to talk about it. That's why we're here. So there's actually quite a long list of transportation goals that are in the vision document. This is just a sample of them. As you can see from the screen, they're pretty high level. So we have, transportation for all, and making sure that we're planning for all different modes, cars, buses, bikes, people who are walking, even future types of transportation that maybe we don't currently have. There's a goal around transportation management and addressing speed and traffic calming, for example, in neighborhoods, and everything related to freight, complete streets. And again, this is just a really small sample. So today our goal is to really dive into the details of what does this all actually mean? What are our priorities? So I'm going to now hand it off to Austin, and he's going to talk about some of those draft policies that we've heard already through the visioning process. Austin?
Thanks, Eunice. So we're going to talk about some ideas that came from previous outreach in the project. In earlier phases, we asked people about their priorities, and we heard a lot of great ideas that didn't necessarily make sense as goals, but we wanted to make sure that we took down those ideas. So you'll see them here presented as policies that were previously drafted. Those ideas have been summarized from the vision document that we shared with the community and that council accepted. So today our goal is to test the ideas, not the wording. So we're not wordsmithing these. We're just testing, do you like these policies or these ideas? This is, again, a small sample of the total number of policy ideas that we have. We would definitely encourage you to go to the project website and check out all the previously drafted policies that are there, as well as new ideas for new policies that are there as well. As we're going along, sometimes in other meetings, we've gotten a little lost in the verbiage. And so I want to clarify that when we're talking about things like, or when you see words like encourage or promote, those are talking about incentives, not mandates. If you see something like require, then that would be more of a mandate. So just to be clear about what we're talking about when we're talking about these policies, whether they're things that we want to encourage with incentives or whether they're things that we're thinking about making a requirement. And then the last thing is that if you have questions as we're going along, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll definitely have time to get your thoughts and your ideas. And if you drop comments in the chat, we'll use those as well. We're going to keep track of all the text that goes into that chat, and we will share it online afterwards. So it'll be available for people to see. So let's jump into the policy ideas. The first group is about multimodal transportation. So the policy about destinations is really about connecting destinations like parks, schools, shopping with our transportation. And so that's not just roadways, but also biking options and pedestrian infrastructure too. The policy about pedestrian and bicycle networks is about expanding those networks that we have and making sure they accommodate all ages and abilities. So understanding that not everybody needs or wants the same infrastructure, and understanding how to make sure that we're meeting all those different needs. The street design policy is really more about prioritization of the infrastructure that we're investing in. So this one suggests prioritizing bike and pedestrian facilities before adding additional lanes to roads for motor vehicles. And then the one about transit centers is about supporting the development of additional transit stations and transit hubs outside of downtown. And that would be in coordination with Chariots. So we'll jump over to the live poll. And again, you can vote for as many of these as you like. If you like them all, go ahead and vote for all of them. If you like some of them, vote for whichever ones you like. But we'll give people a couple minutes here to decide what they want to vote for here. And I'm going to jump back to those descriptions of those policies so that people can see them while they vote.
while people are voting, I thought I would add in, Steve or Ted, feel free to jump in. Chariots is actually in the process of a project to look at a South Station Transit Center, and I know they have a survey that's live. So if you're interested in that, that's happening. I think on the project website.
Thanks. So checking out, oh, go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, I can just confirm that. Yes, we do have a South Salem Transit Center study that is ongoing at this time. We're working in a consultant to analyze different locations for a kind of hub for alternative modes, not just buses in South Salem. And we would love your feedback. There's, if you go to chariots.org/, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of a different survey. If you go to southsalemtc.com, I believe. Let me just confirm that. I'll put it in the chat. How's that?
Perfect, sounds good. And it looks like we've got a good number of votes going there. Seeing the numbers change a little bit more. But we can go ahead and move on to the next group, I think. So this next set of policy ideas is about safety and accessibility. So the accessibility policy is about improving sidewalks and other facilities, making sure that they're accessible for people with mobility devices and all types of users. So not just able-bodied people, and making sure that our network of sidewalks is really serving everyone. The equity policy is about increasing equitable access to convenient transit options. So that's for all ages, incomes, especially in underserved areas. So prioritizing areas where there's less infrastructure to improve them. Traffic calming is about slowing traffic in residential neighborhoods. So that might mean if you've heard the term road diet, to help slow down traffic with either narrower streets or speed bumps. And then the one about resiliency is about improving our network, our transportation network, to make sure that we reduce risk from natural hazards, whether that's like an earthquake hazard or some other type of natural hazard, making sure that we're ready and resilient. So we'll jump over to the next set of, or the next poll. While people are voting, I'll jump back over to those policies again so you can read them. And it looks like we have a question asking if staff is voting. That's a great question. I think typically staff hasn't necessarily participated in these polls, though I did notice that we had a large number of votes in that first poll, so who knows?
Maybe Chariots is voting, which is fine. I don't think city staff is voting.
If anybody has questions or needs clarification about the intent of any of these policy ideas, feel free to share that in the chat. Give folks another 30 seconds or so. Eunice.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, can a city staff member who is also a resident vote?
I guess so. I mean, city staff is, you know, have been involved in crafting these ideas. I should say that this is not the only way we're getting input on policy ideas, and so it's not going to be a strict 20 people voting, so you'll see it online. It's kind of a bigger part of a bigger discussion. And Laura, you say, what do you not see online? Is it not live to YouTube right now? Maybe Shelby or Zachary can check.
All right. Good. Glad to hear that, Lori.
Great, thank you.
All right. Why don't we keep rolling? This next set of policy ideas is about efficiency and performance, as well as livability. So that street connectivity policy is about making sure that we're connecting streets in multiple ways to reduce the lengths of trips and to improve walking and biking options. So that's making sure that we have lots of different ways to get from one place to another. The congestion policy is about managing and improving our transportation system to reduce congestion. We know that council already addressed the crossing over the Willamette, so we'll see if that has already been decided for now. But we'll move to the placemaking policy, which is about promoting placemaking and a sense of personality in places, I guess is what that means, through streetscape design. So whether that's planters or something specific to a given neighborhood in the streetscape to make sure that it's reminiscent of the place that it's in. And then that impacts policy is about making sure that the benefits of transportation are shared equitably and that any burdens are either mitigated or minimized. And so making sure that one group isn't burdened more so than another, and making sure that everybody is able to have equitable access to transportation options. So we will jump over to the poll here. And it looks like there are some comments in the chat. Thanks for that note, Victor.
So there's a question about, I'm assuming B is the bridge, or is B the option for public? Holly, can you explain your question? I'm sorry.
Well, it says transportation system. So does that include public transit, or is this just talking about cars and other types of vehicles?
I would let Anthony or Julie answer, but I think that when we think about managing the whole transportation system, we're talking bigger. And Julie said yes, not just vehicles.
So that could include public transportation options as well as walking and biking options. So it's a holistic view of that system. All right. What about skateboards? That's a good question. There are some people who use skateboards as a mode of transportation. And I guess right now that isn't something that we have a policy about specifically, but it could potentially. We have a comment that congestion does cause people to drive less. That's duly noted. Selena's asking, what was City Council's decision about the Willamette River crossing? Eunice, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. The City Council decided not to move forward with a third bridge across the Willamette. And that was, I think, several years ago now. Is that enough clarification? That project, I should say, so the Salem River Crossing project is still in the transportation system plan as a project. So when that plan is updated, I there could be more discussion about it if council decides to take that up again. Or they could decide to remove it from the transportation system plan. Julie, feel free to jump in.
I jumped out for a moment, so I'm not sure I got the total question, but on the Salem River Crossing, the council decision was to not move forward with the Salem River Crossing preferred alternative, draft preferred alternative as it was envisioned. It was not to never do another bridge across the Willamette River. And so I think there is still open dialogue on that need.
Thanks, Julie. So I think there's another question about staff voting. So there are staff on this call, a number of people. And so I think whoever's counting there may be saying that the number of staff minus, or the number of participants minus the number of staff is fewer than 30. So someone mentioned that it might be possible to vote for more than, for the same option twice. I'm not sure if that's possible. I haven't seen that before, but just a reminder that city staff isn't voting in this one. All right, let's move on. So the next set of policies is about parking as well as greenhouse gas emissions and the environment. So the first one, entitled flexibility, is about having lower parking minimums in order to provide flexibility about how parking requirements are met. So whether that's through shared parking agreements or just not providing quite as much because potentially development might be close to transit, frequent transit, allowing some flexibility when it comes to that. The sustainable design idea is about encouraging new or improved surface parking lots to have sustainable design features. So that includes stormwater features or trees, things like that, to just make it a more sustainable space. The policy about single occupancy vehicles is about using a number of options to help to decrease reliance on single occupancy vehicles. Those strategies haven't necessarily been defined here, though that's something that might get addressed in the transportation systems plan update. And then the system efficiency policy is about prioritizing transportation demand management, transit service upgrades, and bike and pedestrian facility upgrades to relieve congestion before using the option of widening roads. So we'll jump over to the poll again. And someone asked to define parking minimum. So in our zoning, we have requirements for the amount of parking that needs to be provided. Sometimes that's based on square footage of a given use, and it sometimes depends between different uses how much parking is required. So we could adjust in our zoning code how much parking is required, the minimum amount.
Looks like the poll hasn't started.
Shoot.
So I just add that the city council has started already reducing parking requirements. This was done along Chariot's core network for multifamily housing during a multifamily housing design project. I think wrapped up 1.5 years or 2 years ago, maybe it was 1.5 years ago. We are going to be looking at parking again as it relates to the core network and reducing greenhouse gas emissions through the zoning subcommittee that I spoke a little bit about, and we'll talk a little bit about later.
So I am getting an error message about this polling question. I'm not entirely sure why. So I apologize for that. I'm not sure what's going on with this one. maybe
Maybe
Eunice,
move on and I'll see if I can look in the background.
yeah, we can hopefully come back to this in a minute if Eunice can figure out what's going on. So in the meantime, we can potentially take any additional questions or comments that people have about this. Feel free to drop your questions or comments in the chat and then we'll address them. And if we need clarification about any questions, we'll ask you to unmute.
Austin, I can just explain a little bit what Eunice was talking about, the Chariot's core network. That is a policy that the Chariot's board of directors has adopted for certain streets, major corridors like Commercial in South Salem, Lancaster Drive in East Salem. There's a short segment of Edgewater Street in West Salem. So these are corridors that Chariots has determined that are priorities for our transit network. And we would prioritize service on those streets if we did have to make service cuts of any kind, we would be cutting off of those corridors before we would have to cut on the corridors. So yeah, it's too bad I can't post a map in the chat. Otherwise I could do that. But yeah, in general, what Eunice was talking about, there are major streets and major routes, major transit routes that are running 30-minute or better service at this time.
Thanks, Ted. Yeah, that's helpful. We have a question that says, should the plan contemplate the possibility of more delivery vehicles on streets and potentially aerial delivery via drone? That's a good question. I do believe that we have a policy idea that maybe wasn't in this presentation, or maybe it'll be shared later as a new idea about how the city can adapt to changing technology and accommodate new technology and changes to how we get around and how things get taken from one place to another. So I think that's a great suggestion. Any other questions? All right. See. Has there been a consideration to permanently shut down a street or two in downtown for a better foot traffic experience? For example, Court Street between Commercial and High. Maybe Julie could speak to that.
And I guess not recently. We did a Central Salem mobility study a number of years ago, which I think finished in 2013, that looked at two-waying a number of streets, including both High and Church Street, as well as Court and State Street. We did not, at that time, there was not a recommendation to shut down an entire street. We have looked in the past about maybe an intermittent shutdown for events, like with Chemeketa Street when it used to host the Wednesday market. So, yeah.
All right, thanks, Julie. So it doesn't look like Eunice was able to fix that last question or that last polling question. So we'll move on and see if we can troubleshoot it. And if we can, we'll come back to it. I have another question asking, are we considering more greenways or bike boulevards? Julie? I will say, certainly that's been something that we've heard expressed throughout the project. And so I think that idea is reflected in the policy ideas that we have, but maybe Julie can speak to what the city's doing right now.
Yeah, so our transportation system plan does include quite a few additional what we refer to as family-friendly bikeways. Whether or not those all change to be greenways or not is something that will be discussed when we're updating the transportation system plan. But it is, a plan for the city to try to encourage those off arterial routes so that people walking and bicycling can have a more comfortable experience accessing destinations. So yeah, that is in our plan, but we will be looking to refine that and maybe review the prioritization and the funding streams that can help to support those networks.
Great. The next question that I see says, in order for pedestrians to get to bus routes, folks must have safe sidewalks to walk on. Any consideration to increase the city repair of sidewalks? We do have policy ideas related to improving pedestrian facilities and prioritizing those. So that is something that we've heard from the community, and it's something we're trying to include in this plan. We also have a program called the Safer Crossings program on our website, where people can suggest locations that they think would benefit from upgraded crossing infrastructure. And so some of those have begun to be implemented, I think. Julie, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say that the sidewalk network is definitely important, and trying to maybe prioritize where gaps are as well as where repair is needed. As many people probably know, we do invest quite a bit in sidewalk repair in the city, but the need that, vastly exceeds the available resources. And so that's a difficult conversation that council has to struggle with, given available resources versus the need. So as we develop and refine the transportation system plan update, we will be looking to prioritize, and a lot around transit corridor is definitely going to be a very likely candidate for that prioritization.
All right. The next one I see is about having some data on system inventory and performance to help people understand what they're weighing in on, I guess. So they're saying, for example, we have a deficiency of bike and ped infrastructure in West Salem. And so knowing about that might help influence how people are voting. Julie, do you want to speak to our information, our data on things like that and how we use it?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the question. Let me see if I can find it in the chat box here.
Yeah, it says this policy discussion and our review and input would be helped if we had some data on system inventory and performance.
Okay, yeah, I see it. I see that now. Yeah, I mean, that's an example of why the transportation system plan update will come after our Salem, because there's definitely a deep dive into a lot of information that we really don't have available as part of this higher level discussion. So I think that, focusing on the policy that we want to fill in pedestrian networks around transit or around other destinations is important. And then we can bring in sort of that data piece when we get into identifying projects later.
All right. The next question says, could there be small scale improvements made now, like a Chariot's app that shows bus locations that would improve the customer experience without large scale policy adoption? Maybe Ted could speak to some of the things that they're working on right now, because I know that's
Sure.
there's a lot going on.
Yeah. This is a great suggestion. We do already have our bus stops on Google Maps, as well as the transit app. If you're a transit user, it's a great way to plan your trip via transit. But it doesn't necessarily take into account where sidewalks are when it tells you to walk from your origin to the bus stop. So this is a good thing that, yes, we're very interested in developing something like that. So thanks for that comment. All
right. So I see a lot of other questions in the Oh, maybe just 2. Okay. Hopefully we can knock these out and then keep rolling for the sake of time.
Austin, this is Steve Dickey, Chair. So I want to add one more thing to what Ted said. We are also in the works of, actually in the very final stages of having that information available real time. So our project is underway. We're in the final stages of working through some adjustments and addressing just some calibration issues with the system. But the real-time information of when the next bus is coming is right on the horizon. We actually can test that in-house right now, and it's just a matter of making sure everything's working perfectly before we release it to the public. So that is coming out right now.
Thanks, Steve. That's great. Okay, so maybe one last question about what's the process for reducing speed limits? This person specifically is thinking about Cordon Road and areas where maybe bike lanes are missing as it crosses over Highway 22. So I don't know if maybe Julie can speak to the process of speed limit.
I will share that comment with our traffic engineer. I know that when speed zone requests are desired, they have to be submitted to the Oregon Department of Transportation. I know that we have a couple of requests right now that are being submitted, so I can touch base and get back to you. I believe that was that Phil Carver that asked that question? I can get back to you with that answer. Maybe it might need to come through the neighborhood association.
All right, thanks, Julie. So I think we're going to move on here. If you shared a comment in the chat, we are keeping track of those as well and using them as input. So thank you for folks who just left a comment. So I'm going to turn it over for some new ideas from other cities.
Anthony?
Hi, so as part of this process, we did some research looking at other cities here in Oregon and elsewhere to get a sense of, just a fresh perspective, to get a sense of what other places are doing that might make sense for us that maybe we haven't considered. So one that came across was related to the airport, just promoting a sustainable airport by meeting the region's air transportation needs without compromising livability and quality of life. So I guess we'll run a poll on this one.
Just a point of clarification on these new ideas, you're just voting A for yes and B for no. See if you're unsure. I know that these ones are limited, so folks can only vote once.
I was just going to say, please vote once. And there could be folks that are watching online that are also voting. I'm not sure how many people are doing that, but that's also a possibility.
Okay, give it another minute or a few seconds. It's looking pretty clear that the answer is no. Yeah, this one came out of the Portland plan, and obviously we're talking different scale and different use. So maybe it's not the right thing for right now. Yeah. So do you want to keep going with this one, Eunice or Austin? Or
Rolling for you.
No, go ahead.
okay, we can move on to the next one. So this one's been coming up a lot recently in this discussion, active transportation routes. So this one, we more or less have this one already in our transportation system plan. Is more of a question of just language and actually specifically calling this out. So yeah, developing pedestrian and bicycle friendly alternatives to arterials and collectors for multimodal travel. So this sort of calls to the idea of actually separating the facility from the roadway and keeping it away from the arterials and collectors. And I have a feeling I know how this one will go.
There's a comment related to this about bike lanes being designed today for the strong and fearless category of rider. We need designs including bike lanes separated. So I think that's very much related to this one.
Okay, so yeah, that goes along these lines here.
All right, I'm not seeing
Okay.
any votes come in. Should we keep going?
Yeah. I think that one's pretty clear. Emerging performance measurements. A few of these we'll see kind of deal with emerging technology. And this is one of them, just being attuned to new methods of measuring and evaluating the performance of the transportation system. Get an idea of how you all feel about that. Go ahead, Austin.
All right, so I was going to say if folks are voting unsure, if that's because you just need more clarification about the intent of this policy, let us know and we'll try and provide more information.
Yeah, this would just basically be about just being open. You want that sort of catch-all for new and emerging technology, right? So it may be something that we simply don't know about right now. We come across that a lot with vehicles. So it's the kind of thing that would be helpful for the long-term nature of this plan.
All right, looks like that helped clarify for some folks, so that's great, thanks.
Okay. And sort of along the same lines, emerging user technologies, we see all the time, new types of both, personal transportation vehicles, as well as new apps and new tools coming out to help people get around a little bit more efficiently. So we'd like to gauge here how important you think incorporating emerging user technologies is into this. Julie, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to say that this could also encompass the delivery options that somebody brought up, whether that be by air or other. So we might need to tweak the language a little bit to make sure that it's all encompassing. I was down in Arizona last week and I saw the little, robot delivery things that cross the street with their deliveries unmanned. It was sort of scary. I was scared of hitting one of them.
Wow.
And I think that's a good point, Julian. The language from all of these were again taken from other communities in Oregon. So we would tailor all of these if we actually, they were supported by the community. So they were specific to Salem.
Yeah, right now we're getting a sense of how receptive we are to the idea, right? Not necessarily the exact wording of the language.
And these last couple all came from the city of Hillsborough that did an update of their transportation plan in 2018. And so,
Anthony, just a question. Would this also include electric buses? That's something that Chariots is getting into. We have an order of 5 electric buses that will probably be here next year. And that's kind of the direction of our industry. Does that,
Well,
is this also considered an emerging technology?
I think we've got one coming up for electric vehicles. So you might have stolen our thunder there a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
All right, let's keep going.
Curbside management. Again, as the way people move around changes, think about services like Uber and Lyft. Think about bike sharing services. Think about scooter services, and anything that that might be coming down the road that we even haven't thought about yet. Do we need to include language that will consider how we need to change what we think of as our parking areas, our curbside parking areas, to incorporate these emerging technologies? Here we have one that's kind of close.
If there's anybody who wants to share their reasoning in the chat, that's
this one actually also, this was one of the ones that came from out of state. This was actually in Fort Collins, Colorado. They adopted their plan in 2019, and as probably many of you probably know, their population's just about identical to ours. So they face many of the same issues that we do here in Salem.
all right. Looks like folks have weighed in on that one.
So here we are with electric vehicles, and I'll second what Ted said. This would be where we would capture, fleet services, electric buses, infrastructure to support users of electric cars. So charging stations. What would we be doing to support that? Does that need to be broken out and included and sort of teased out in this? And it's something we're seeing already.
I was going to add that we will probably get recommendations or strategies out of the climate action plan related to electric vehicles and infrastructure as well.
Yeah, I'm sure this one is one that's going to have a lot of overlap with other parts of the plan.
Looks like we have a question about safe battery disposal to go along with this new idea. I think that's a good point. It's not something necessarily that this policy is contemplating, but certainly that would be an important component. So thanks for that idea.
I'm seeing another question from Daniel Roth. Can you name specific strategies for this infrastructure other than a lot of EV parking spaces? There could be, some kind of tax incentives for folks that use electric vehicles. There are the preferred parking areas. Perhaps we work with the power company, power utilities to provide credits. This is an emerging technology as well, and those policies are emerging also. Julie?
And I think those discussions are also going to be happening in the climate action plan. So, maybe not specifically in the transportation system plan, but the, the costs and impacts associated with increasing EV, and then also how to encourage EV. We've talked about things like potentially mandating that all multifamily development, for example, or all housing comes EV ready. So yeah, those discussions are happening.
Those discussions are also happening at the state level. There's some bills related to requirements on EV charging as well that we're tracking.
And there's some good suggestions in the chat as well. So thanks for that, everybody.
I just want to know that there's a conversation going in the chat regarding commercial air service. And so maybe when we get to the new ideas section, if anyone wants to speak up about that, we can have that discussion.
Parking management, and I think this may be the last one of the new ideas. Parking management is obviously a big discussion point, and another one that's probably, I'm sure, going to overlap with other areas of the plan. Establishing and maintaining prices for public parking that balance the supply and demand, which may be changing as the way we acquire and consume goods changes, right? We were talking about delivery services and devices earlier, and curbside management earlier. If more people are using personal transportation vehicles or ride sharing services, do we need as much parking? Do we need to move where parking is? So this is a consideration that makes a lot of sense to me. This one came out of, this was a community idea, looks like, so. Okay, so it looks like we're getting a lot of agreement on a lot of positive feedback on our new policies.
All right. Should we move on, Anthony?
Sure.
All right.
So are there any further questions or comments on the new ideas? I'm trying to, as I talk, read through the chat also. There's a lot going on. I see, and I'm not sure if this is the last one. Don't forget electric bikes from Bill Holmstrom. Yeah, I agree. And I think that would fall under electric vehicles, right? And we'd have to talk about, do we allow electric bikes all the same places that we allow regular bikes? How do we define? In the last couple of years, we've spent a lot of time trying to define personal transportation vehicles, right? Because they come in a lot of shapes and sizes. So it's definitely something that's coming, not just electric bikes, but if you've seen, I've seen people downtown with those one-wheeled kind of boards that they're riding around on. Good luck trying to define that for the Salem Revised Code. So yeah, that's definitely a big issue. Seeing a lot of airport discussion.
Does anyone want to unmute and offer their thoughts on the airport? I'm not as familiar with the ongoing efforts, exactly where they are with bringing back commercial air service, but it sounds like there's a debate in the chat about whether or not we should have commercial air service here. I don't want to turn it into a whole debate about the airport, but if anyone wants to unmute, you're welcome to.
And I have to confess, I don't have an enormous amount of information about how that that process is going towards or not towards commercialization again. So I may not have a huge number of answers there.
we can move on if there's no one who wants to speak up. That's totally fine.
Okay.
So this is where, thanks, Anthony. Sorry.
Sure. No
This is
worries.
where we're asking for your ideas. Do you have new ideas that maybe we're missing or you're not sure if we've captured? As Austin mentioned, we have hundreds of draft policies and new policy ideas that are online on our project website that you can take a look at. But if there's anything that you think's really something we should be considering and you want to voice it now, feel free. Oh, there's a question here. The vision calls for more multifamily housing at the edges of Salem. How will transportation policy support or contradict those ideas? Thanks, EM. And it's true, we have located or proposed to locate new multifamily housing at some of the edges in West and South Salem in particular, where there is vacant land. Just for context, we do know we need more multifamily land to meet our housing needs in the future, and that's something that we're mandated by the state to meet. And so we're looking at ways and different opportunities from infill and redevelopment to vacant land to site that multifamily housing. Where we have cited or proposed new multifamily housing, we are looking at creating more complete neighborhoods by also allowing mixed use and commercial uses so that there are some services, jobs, and shops closer to where new housing might be built in the future. In addition, we're coordinating obviously with Chariots and with infrastructure improvements that may come. And so I won't speak for Chariots, but I do think they're starting a long range plan of their own, and we'll be working closely with them. So we'll be talking about this is what we're kind of hearing and proposing for our Salem, and how can we best coordinate transit service to serve those areas. Ted and Steve, feel free to jump in if I'm not saying that correctly.
No, you're absolutely right, Eunice. We are very close to kicking off our own long-range transit plan. This will be a 20-year plan for Chariot's service, and that will be starting this summer and going for about a 15-month period. To answer the question about Chariots considering some BRT like they have in Eugene, that would probably be considered in our long-range plan. Currently, we do not have any plans for BRT in Salem. However, it's not ruled out. It's just not in the plans at this time.
Ted, it looks like there's also a conversation or a suggestion about changes in traffic infrastructure that speeds up public transit movement, like bus-only signals or something more like, I guess, Eugene. Are there other ways that we can do that beyond just a full bus rapid transit kind of system?
Great question. Yeah, I think, you've probably seen some bus-only lanes being installed by TriMet in Portland. And for Salem, that's certainly something that we would consider if congestion got to the point where our buses were not staying on time, or if we were seeing, having to add more time to our schedules in order to keep the buses on time. But at this point, with the exception maybe of going from West Salem into downtown over the bridge, we just don't see that necessary, but it's certainly something that we want to consider for our long range plan. And Steve, did you want to add anything more to that?
Not really at this point. We're just carrying forward, and I think you summarized that pretty well, Ted. So nothing more to add.
Well, I guess I just wanted to jump in and mention the project that we're working on currently with Chariots for green time extension. So Chariots has funding to enable the buses to communicate with our signals. So if they are running behind, on a particular corridor, they would be able to get the light to hold the green for an extra, number of seconds to allow them to get through that signal. And that's something that is I think we're going to roll out as a pilot sometime in the next year or year and a half. Steve, do you know the timeline on actual implementation?
Yeah, we would be looking at the first corridors in the first set probably within the next year. Really what we're waiting on is because the city is still in the process of selecting their vendor for their updated traffic control system. And since the signal priority or the green light extension system for transit has to incorporate with that before we go out and make a purchase, we want to make sure we know what system the city is actually going to settle on so that we can specify that whatever solution we select works, not just that it will work with them, but work effectively, and they can actually make sure that everything that they're doing and their proposal will match up with what the city has and work very effectively. And that then will be a project that will be done then in phases as we work through the rest of our service area. But we will be starting with our first segment probably within the next year or so.
And then I just saw a question about the ODOT retrofit of the Center Street Bridge, asking if there will be any improvements in addition to the seismic retrofit. Obviously, that is an ODOT project. My understanding is that the scope is only to do a seismic retrofit of the bridge. And so they won't be making any other changes beyond that.
Great, thank you. So I think we're going to move on real quick before we run out of time. So I just wanted to kind of give an update on kind of where we're going from here. So we're going to continue doing outreach on the policies in these type of weekly meetings, as well as out in the community. We also have a survey online right now. And then we'll be kind of incorporating all of that feedback and updating the policies and presenting that back to the community, and hopefully adopting all policies with the updated comprehensive plan package at the end of the year. As I mentioned kind of earlier in the meeting today, the policies related to transportation and then in the future also parks and recreation will be forwarded to those plans and their updates. And so we will be getting all of that information and making sure that they can be passed on. So this is our project website, cityofsalem.net/oursalem. You'll find a link to our policy survey, both in English and in Spanish there. There's a lot more detail and a lot more questions, so feel free to participate in that and spread the word. And then in addition to policies, we're doing a lot of work on the other portions of the Our Salem project. As I mentioned earlier, we have a new interactive map that we hope to post online next week. That will be proposals for zone changes that reflects the vision document that we brought to council in March. And so you'll be able to kind of go to a specific property, see what the proposed zoning is, a link to what that zoning means, either existing code language or proposed kind of overviews of new zones. And then you'll be able to add comments by dropping a pin and saying, actually, I want it to be this zone or that zone. So we'll launch that hopefully next week. In addition, the zoning subcommittee that I mentioned earlier that includes city councilors and planning commissioners has their first meeting also next week on Friday. Those meetings are going to be focused on zoning options to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There will be an opportunity for public comment. So if you want to sign up to do that, you can do that on the Our Salem page. So this is just kind of a big picture of where we are, and hopefully we'll start the adoption process by the end of the year. That'll be public hearings, a lot of notice, so hang in there with us. And this is just my information. Contact me anytime. It's project link. There's a comment that says, I appreciate the desire for public input, but it seems like the process has been done several times over a number of years. How do we get down to actually making changes? That is a fair comment. We have been working on this for several years, and there have been previous attempts to update the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan map. What we plan to do, and I think this might be unique from other communities in Oregon, in that we're not just bringing through goals and policies through the adoption process, But to the extent that we can implement some of those through changes to the zoning and changes to the zoning code, we will be bringing that all together to actually start some of those changes. In addition, the proposed comprehensive plan update will include an implementation plan. I don't think there's any way to tackle every single idea or action in the first year or two or three, but we will want to prioritize what are the things that we need to do to keep this moving and to start implementing it and who's responsible. And so that's something that we'll be working on as we get closer to understanding the language of all of that. Julie, go ahead.
I would just say that that will also tie in with the climate action plan. The prioritization of implementation is really going to be closely connected with that.
So the question is, when will we do the adoption process? That's with the zoning and the zoning code changes. That would be hopefully by the end of the year. And then we would just chip away at the rest of the kind of steps. If you're asking about the transportation plan update, is that the question, Peter? Feel free to unmute. I just want to make sure
Yeah, I just would like to see the process actually moving forward rather than continually asking for public input over and over again.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're definitely trying to move the project forward. We also just we're trying to balance making sure we're hearing from the community. There's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different folks that live in the Salem area. So we're trying to balance getting the input so we're making sure we're doing it right and moving it forward. So I hear your frustration.
And then I guess just also recognizing that as time goes on, our community does change. And so some of these things do take time to implement. And so we need to continue the public dialogue throughout, implementation and update to make sure that, we haven't had a change of course from our community members.
And there's one last comment that Salem needs to consider more of a form-based code rather than our current zoning system. I think to some extent, we're slightly moving in that direction, particularly with our mixed-use zones that are very flexible in all the different uses you can do, but they're very much focused on an urban kind of form. I'm not sure that the Salem community is completely at form-based across the community, but I hear what you're saying. There's some comments here about, we will never meet any of our emission targets if we don't transition away from single occupancy vehicles and toward expanding fully electrified public transit. What is being done to make that happen? I don't know if someone at Transit wants to take that on. I think there is a lot of work going on. Ted had mentioned purchasing, for example, electric buses. The climate action plan is all about trying to figure out how we can reduce emissions, including from transportation. So I think there's a lot of work being done on that front.
Yes, and Eunice, we are, as Ted stated, we have 5 of the electric buses en route. We have applied for 5 more and additional charging infrastructure in the next round. We are working through that. There's a lot of limitations with the current technology. So some of that is where we have to plan very carefully, because in some cases the electric buses would require us to have more buses because they don't have the same range. So these are things that we definitely are very supportive of this. And the cost of these buses is significantly higher than the cost of the compressed natural gas buses that we're operating right now. And so, it's part of it is also the budget. We currently, stretch our dollars as far as we can, but we are dependent upon grants in most cases to be able to make these major capital purchases, and are trying to do so wisely so that we can make good choices. But the one thing that we have done is, when we are doing these projects, we are trying to also make sure that we select routes where they're going to get the heaviest use and have the biggest impact, where we have significant amounts of congestion and therefore reduce the amount of carbon and greenhouse gas production along those corridors.
Great, thank you. There's quite a few comments in the chat about stopping development on the fringe and the edges of Salem. And we've heard that for sure. And I think part of this project is really trying to figure out how we manage the growth as the growth continues. We have a lot of land within our urban growth boundary that is available for development. And so currently it's largely zoned for single family homes. What we're trying to do through this project and what we've heard from the community is a desire is to make that development more walkable by, for example, allowing for small scale services and shops so that, you know, as development happens, they're not just large swaths of single family with nothing to walk to and not able to get to services. Part of it is also just coordinating again with transit. So we understand where there could be potential for a lot of development and where we can connect with buses so that, again, not everyone has to get in their car. So I've heard that concern. I hear that concern. I hear those comments and I appreciate it. There's another comment here about bike infrastructure in Salem being stuck in the 20th century. I don't know if anyone wants to address that. I think we're trying to move forward with different types of infrastructure, whether it's buffered bike lanes or bike ways. But Julie, did you want to add anything?
I mean, our transportation plan talks about wanting to develop bike infrastructure to meet the needs of all users. And so that is something that we're moving forward. I don't exactly know what the commenter meant. I know that bike lanes are maybe sometimes one of the most visible, you know, bicycle infrastructure types because, at least in Salem, because you see something. Bike routes onto local streets where we're really trying to encourage people who don't want to be on the busy street to use another route. Maybe there's not quite as much infrastructure with that. I know the Winter Maple bike corridor, we've done wayfinding, reduced speed limits, put in crossing improvements. We're going to be installing shared lane markings this summer along that route to try to sort of draw people's attention to it. But there are a lot of other routes that I think people can use for getting to destinations. It's just a matter of maybe education. So anyway, I'm not quite sure what was meant by that.
There's also a question about, to chariots, about old electric bus technology with the overhead kind of wires.
Yeah, I can briefly take that. That technology has been around for many years and has proved successful in San Francisco and Seattle. But in general, it's a very specific technology that each one of those agencies has developed themselves. It's not something that's readily available, and that's why you don't see it in more cities. Not to say that it wouldn't be something to consider for Salem, but with the technology moving towards battery electric buses and the efficiencies of the batteries, that's generally where we're seeing the technology going and leading us really nationwide. So.
Thanks, Jen. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up? If not, I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating today. If you want to come back tonight, you can, 5:30. We're going to be doing this again. And you can always reach out to me if you think of other questions or comments via email or just give me a call. We're happy to chat. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.